Let's get a little more detail on this from Stephanie G. from Human Rights Watch. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us. First, let's clarify that safe in the EU's terms means that refugees' lives are not in danger, and in that sense, they are safe and protected here in Turkey. But your definition of safe seems to encompass a lot more than that.
Yeah, the term safe in the phrase safe third country is a legal concept that exists in both EU and international law. And in this context, safe does not just mean safe from war or persecution, it actually means access to full refugee protection and rights. And that includes the right to education, the right to health, the right to work. And these rights have to be there not only in theory or on paper, but actually in practice for individual refugees.
But Stephanie, with almost 3 million refugees living in Turkey, is it fair, is it realistic to expect the country to provide jobs, education, and health care to nearly 3 million people?
Well, that's exactly our concern, and it actually isn't fair to say that Turkey needs to handle this burden on its own after it's already undeniably done an incredibly generous thing by allowing over 2.5 million refugees to enter from Syria over the last 5 years. The problem with the EU-Turkey deal is that it rests on this fundamental unfairness, that instead of saying, okay, the asylum seekers who come from Turkey to the EU and seek asylum there have a right to have their claims heard and to have access to full procedures in the EU. Instead, the EU is looking for a way to send them back using whatever legal argument they can to a country that's already carrying more than its share of this burden at this point.
But Stephanie, is it realistic to believe that Europe should be able to manage this influx?
I think it absolutely is. I don't think it's a question of resources in this case. I think it's a question of political will. I mean, even if the entire Syrian refugee population today showed up in Europe, that would still only amount to about 1% of the EU's overall population. And nobody's even asking for that. Nobody's saying send every Syrian refugee to Europe. I think it's very clear that the EU has the resources, the space, the political creativity to come up with solutions here that would allow it to actually participate greater and more fairly in this task of global responsibility sharing. It's really a question of whether leaders are willing to commit to that and to carry that through.
Okay, Stephanie G., we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington.